All right, we're talking with best-selling author Dave Wedge, best-selling author, journalist, podcaster, and now apparently you're gonna are you going to be performing on stage at the Saints, Sinners, and Serial Killers thing at the Wilbur on April 20th?
We are, yes. We're taking our podcast to the live stage, and it's going to be it's going to be kind of a unique show that I don't think has really been done in the true crime space, where Casey Sherman and I, my co-host and frequent co-author, will be kind of the omnipotent narrators, kind of directing the action, and we'll have an ensemble cast portraying some of the vignettes from the different stories that we're telling, from some of the books we've written and some of the stories we've covered in our journalism careers. And there'll be a multimedia component as well with video. We've got a musician and, crime scene photos, all that stuff. It's going to be a really multifaceted night of true crime. It's going to be pretty cool. I'm excited.
I tried looking up other podcasts some podcasts tour the country and they do it live, but I haven't found one yet that does what you guys are doing here. You've hired actors. You're going to have actors on stage along with the multimedia presentation. So are they going to be they're going to be reenacting scenes, like murder scenes and stuff like that?
Yeah, they'll be reenacting scenes, like, for example, one of the books that we wrote was Hunting Whitey, the capture and killing of America's most wanted crime boss, which is kind of the end of the Whitey Bulger saga. We wrote that book in 2020, and it tells the story of really how Whitey was caught and what his life was like in prison, and then how he was murdered. And we were able to get over 70 letters that Whitey himself had written to different people, his friends outside prison and some other former inmates. So a lot of the dialogue in that book and in the show on April 20th at the Wilbur is actually Whitey's exact words from those letters. So there's a scene in the book and in the stage show where Whitey is actually captured by the FBI, and he's in an elevator going down, explaining how he's feeling and that something's off. And this isn't dialogue that Casey and I made up or took creative license with. These are Whitey's actual words from the letters that we obtained. So that's the kind of stuff that we're doing in this show. It's really immersive storytelling, but it's exclusive stuff that we've been able to get through our books and the stories that we've covered.
On a side note to that, I've seen some of those letters, or some letters that Whitey has written for a psychotic murderer, a sociopath, whatever. He had the most amazingly neat cursive handwriting.
He did. He had great penmanship, and much like his brother Billy, he fancied himself a scholar. But Whitey was a more of a philosophical guy in these letters. He often talks about the glory days of when he was in Alcatraz, and talks about how it's not like it used to be, and he pines for the old days when men were men, and it's just the letters are fascinating to read, and we've got a great actor that's playing Whitey Bulger, a guy named Paul Kandarian, who's been in a ton of movies around all the made in Massachusetts movies. He's had roles in a lot of them, and he's going to be portraying Whitey Bulger, which is no small feat, but he's doing a great job. And again, it's not like we're giving him, made up dialogue. These are Whitey's own words, so he's really getting into character, and it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, you're covering the Boston Strangler and Mark David Chapman. So you're covering the killing of John Lennon in this production, right?
Yeah. So those stories are both based on books that Casey and I wrote.
Right.
We did a book again in 2020 with James Patterson called The Last Days of John Lennon. And Casey and I went back and really reinvestigated the John Lennon murder and sort of what was going on in Lennon's life in those last months before he was murdered by Mark David Chapman. And, we were the only journalists to pull that criminal case file in decades. So we went down to New York and pulled out the old Mark David Chapman case file, and it was a box of documents that, like I said, hadn't been seen in years, and they were the arrest reports, all the psychiatric evaluations of Mark David Chapman. There's John Lennon's autopsy reports, all that stuff. So again, a lot of the material in that book that we wrote with James Patterson and that will be in the stage show comes from that research we did and people we interviewed, witnesses to the actual murder. We actually spoke to the doctor who tried to save Lennon's life and massaged his heart in his dying moments. And there's some moments in that on the stage show as well. So
wow.
It's pretty intense stuff. And the Strangler one is interesting too, because my co-author Casey Sherman, his aunt Mary Sullivan, was actually the last victim of the Boston Strangler.
Oh my God!
So that's why he wrote that book. That was the first book Casey wrote when he was a producer at Channel 4 in Boston, and that was his first book because it was a personal family story. And he kind of went and reinvestigated the Boston Strangler case. So that's what that book's about. That's a really obviously compelling story with some unique inside information as well.
I mean, you've written a lot of books on a lot of awful things. You've written a lot of articles for various publications on a lot of just horrible things. I mean, how do you not let that? It's like you see the same things that the first responders are seeing, and that the morgue people are seeing, and how do you not let that get to you after a while?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. And I've always looked at it as you compartmentalize a lot of things in your life, and that's just what I do. Much like an EMT or a firefighter or a cop or whatever. You just that's your job, and you put it aside when it's time to put it aside. But I will say that these stories you do get emotionally invested in a lot of these stories. Like we wrote a book about the Boston Marathon bombings that became the movie Patriots Day a few years back, and we became really good friends with some of those marathon survivors, and to this day, some of them are my best friends, and I really, respect those people and love them as people. And so it's hard to sometimes distance yourself emotionally when you get to know the people involved. But, we also try to not be too macabre in our writing, and we try to get into the psychology of these cases, and also tell the stories of the silver linings in them. For example, the Whitey one, it's not so much a story. We don't go into the dirty details throughout the whole book about pulling out teeth and all this horrible stuff that Whitey did. There's some of that, but that's not the focus. We focus on the people that figured out where Whitey was and how they captured him, the people that Whitey lived with when he was on the run. We tracked those people down. We interviewed them. So you're learning more about the story and how it happened, and not so much the gory details. Like I said, there's some of that, but we focus more on the psychology and how these stories unfold, which I think is what's fascinating.
Well, America is fascinated by it. I mean, true crime is so huge. I mean, it's the most popular genre, not just in books and podcasts. I mean, documentaries, movies, everything. And why is that? Is it why do you think that is? Is it an obsession with the macabre, or is it like the psychological part, or does everybody inside want to kind of solve that crime?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I think that, we're fascinated with the unknown and the macabre, of course. People don't want to think that human beings are capable of certain things. And when they find out that they are, they want to know why. Why would someone ever do that? And it's something that's inside people that, we can't really explain, but there's a thirst for that knowledge. But I do think the latter point you made, there is an element where people want to be that armchair detective and try to figure out the crime and piece it together. See, I told you, it's like watching Law and Order. Me and my wife watch Law and Order, and we see who can, the earliest in the show can pick out the person who did it. We're like, all right, that dude did it right there. And then, so it's a game people like to play. But with these stories, again, these are iconic stories that New Englanders all are aware of, and even globally. But we have had the opportunity to really get inside these stories like few people have been able to, and provide this extra level of detail and information that people definitely didn't know before we wrote our books and told these stories. And I think that's what's fascinating, is people are going to watch Whitey Bulger portrayed on stage and hear his actual words of what he was thinking at the end there when the gig was finally up.
Yeah.
And it was so, I'm so privileged to be able to get that information and share it. It's really compelling to watch. A 16-year journey comes to an end in an elevator in an apartment building in California. What was going through the guy's head? Well, now you'll be able to hear it.
Well, the show is Saints, Sinners, and Serial Killers. That's at the Wilbur Theater, April 20th. Now, you mentioned, you guys were part of the, you and Casey in your book were part of the Patriots Day movie. And any progress on the John Lennon movie, which we mentioned that book earlier. I was reading that there may be a movie in the works on that.
Yeah, so there's a production company that has the rights to that book, and that's James Patterson. So it's much like if I'm hired to play bass with I don't know, whoever, the Stones or something. Mick Jagger's making those decisions. So James Patterson's driving that bus. He was great to work with, and we're partners on it. Right now, no news to report, but it's in development. Which as you know, Mike, development.
Right.
Go on for a period of time, but we think there's a great series there, and especially the stuff being made now with the fascination with true crime and what's old is new. I think that a lot of people would love to see that story unfold in a series, so we're hoping it gets made.
And then I was reading that they were looking at making a movie on the Tom Brady book. Is that going to happen?
So that's another one. That's been a roller coaster. We now have a great script. We've partnered with the NFL Players Association on that project, so we're actually working with them on it. But now with Tom retiring and then unretiring and then retiring, so I think the ball's kind of no pun intended, but the ball's kind of in Tom's court right now to where that one goes. But the script is great, and we love the story, so we hope it gets made. Because again, I think that Deflategate saga is just a fascinating sort of courtroom drama. It was so silly, but it became so serious, and it said a lot about sports and pop culture at the time. It's a crazy story.
Well, just to clarify, if people are listening, Tom Brady didn't murder anyone. It was just a book about his career, unless you want to count the Super Bowl, the greatest comeback in sports history against the Falcons.
They tried to murder his career.
Yeah, they did. That's attempted murder, right?
Yeah, but it's funny. You mentioned the macabre and the true crime, and so that's kind of why we did that book, and we did another book about Pete Frady's The Ice Bucket Challenge.
Yes.
So we don't want to just we just love great stories, but I love nonfiction, but it doesn't always have to be true crime. But the Brady one really does. The way we wrote that, it's a sports book in the sense with the Super Bowl that you just mentioned, but it's really a courtroom drama. So it's a thriller, and there's a lot of corporate intrigue there with Goodell and the way the league handled all that and their motivations. So that's a fun one too. And again, I think it'd make a great series. So we have episodes for a lot of these stories we're talking about, Mike, on the actual podcast, which is why we're doing the stage show. The podcast is out there on all the platforms, Saints, Sinners, and Serial Killers, and we just decided to bring it to the live stage to kind of bring that fourth dimension to it.
Well, I think it's a great idea, and you're definitely breaking new ground here. I mean, it's not just a couple of guys sitting at a table, recording a podcast. I mean, you've got a whole production, which I think is pretty cool. And then you've got the book out, Riding with Evil, Taking Down the Notorious Pagan Motorcycle Gang. That's something, I haven't read the book, but I've been reading stuff about it. That's something which is so ripe for some kind of mini-series. I mean, we've had series like Sons of Anarchy and things like that, but this looks pretty amazing. And you did this with a guy who was undercover with the Pagan gang for 2-3 years, was it?
Yeah. So his name's Ken Croak. He was a Boston ATF agent, and he's the only cop to ever infiltrate the Pagans, which are the Hells Angels rivals. They're active mostly in the Northeast, but they've grown down the Atlantic seaboard, and actually they have a chapter in California now. But they're very violent. They're lesser known than the Hells Angels, but they're more violent. They're a lot of meth dealing, guns. They're into bombs. Believe it or not, they make a lot of bombs, and that's how they kind of attack the Hells Angels. They'll wire bombs to their vehicles and stuff. So yeah, it's a great story, and I agree. I think it'd make a great series, and from your lips to God's ears, I guess the saying, right? But yeah, Ken was undercover and became an actual patched member of the gang, and lived with them for 2 years. Had a wife and 3 little girls back here in Massachusetts, and he went down and lived in a chapter in New York throughout the course of the case, and ended up taking down a bunch of really bad guys for a lot of really horrible crimes. And yeah, it's a fascinating story. It's got that true crime element, where there's a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but it's not all gore. It's psychological. It's what made it tick, the psychological aspect of him living that double life. And, that's a big part of the story. And he's a great character, great guy. I wrote it with Ken. So Ken and I did that one. I didn't do that one with Casey. So, but that's just out, and, hoping to get that one made as well. It's fun, man. It's fun to find these stories and share them. I think, I've worked in journalism for 25 years now, and, I love to find these stories and really dig into them, and it's great to be able to share them in all these platforms.
What fascinates me about those stories is the undercover aspect, because I don't have the stomach, like when my wife confronts me about not replacing the toilet paper, in the bathroom. I can't think on my feet and make up some, and I can't imagine living with a violent biker gang that likes to kill people with bombs for like years and just having the wherewithal.
It's crazy, Mike, and that's what was so fun about writing this book, was to get inside Ken's head and see how he did that. A quick little anecdote I'll share with you. He said, picture you're at a dinner party and you someone says, "Oh yeah, what'd you do yesterday?" "Oh, I mowed the lawn. I took the kid out to the soccer game, and then we oh, where'd you go eat?" "Oh, we went to Chili's, and what'd you get?" "Yeah, burger." "Yeah, cool." And then 5 weeks later, someone asks you the same thing. Are you going to remember?
Right.
And that's what his life was like every single day. Those guys were just they're knuckleheads and they're thugs, but they're criminal geniuses, a lot of them. And their only job is to make sure that they don't have rats and informants inside. So they challenged you at every step. And that's the life he lived. And to the point where he said when he got out, he had to go talk to therapists to slow down his brain.
Yeah.
Because his brain was working overtime the entire time, like juggling lies, all around, in every facet of his life. I mean, the guy had to just constantly remember these lies that he had told to these crazy psychos with bombs and crystal meth, So it really is a crazy, crazy story, and the average person has no idea what undercover guys like him go through, and we're lucky to have them, because otherwise these gangs would just kind of proliferate and do whatever they wanted unchecked, because it's the only way to get them is to get inside.
Well, just a quick side note on this: does he ever cover? He was in mostly the New York chapter, you said, right?
Yeah, he started up here with a local support club, the Devil's Disciples, and then it moved into the Pagans down in New York. The case. It's funny. He never said, "I'm going to go undercover and become a pagan and take them all down." These cases just kind of unfold naturally, and it wasn't like he said, "I'm going to do it for 2 years." It just, that's where the investigation went. It could have been 2 hours, could have been 2 months, could have been 2 days,
right?
But it ended up being 2 years.
Because I know, my family lives in Western Pennsylvania, and the Pagans are around there. I don't even know.
Yeah, they're active there, very active,
and they work with the Amish, which is amazing to me. I don't know if you cover any of that in the book, but they would go to these Amish youth social gatherings and sell meth and cocaine. And I remember,
I'm not surprised.
And I think it's hilarious that a gang called the Pagans are working with the Amish. And it was funny. I remember a news article from years ago saying that these two Amish guys were arrested with a couple of guys from the Pagans, and the two Amish guys' names were Abner King. They had the same exact name, but then it said no relation. It's just, it just blew my mind that the Amish were working with someone like that, or at least the Amish kids anyway,
Well, there was that series about the Amish, the organized crime in the Amish country a few years ago, and there's scenes in the book. There's a couple of big scenes in the book that take place in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where the Pagans have big annual gatherings, and they partner with a lot of organized crime factions. We cover a little bit of it in the book, where they would do jobs for the mafia. The mafia would need them to do collections or even assaults, and basically hire pagans to do it. And these guys aren't they're not selective. They go where whoever will pay them to do the things that they do. And, it's very old school. There's old school extortion involved with shaking down bar owners and, strong-arming people, business owners and things like that. So and then your traditional guns and drugs.
Right. And
they're bad dudes, though, man.
Yeah.
They're outlaws, and they're true outlaws in every sense of the word.
Well, they're getting into the seedy underbelly of the Amish quilt making underground. So that's
probably lucrative.
Yeah, it is.
Supply chain issues. I'm sure you can probably upsell those these days.
People dish it out for that stuff. All right. Well, Dave Wedge, thanks a lot. Before you go, you are a great lover of music, like I am. And you've written a lot about music. You've written about everybody from Ozzy to Daryl Hall to Rob Zombie to Moby. I mean, just a great variety of artists. If you can, what were your thoughts about the shocking passing of Taylor Hawkins from the Foo Fighters?
Yeah, it's funny. I obviously was a huge Nirvana guy. That broke. I think I'm around the same age as you, Mike. But that broke when I was in my early 20s, and that was. When that came out, it was much like, NWA and the Beastie Boys and even a band like Korn. When bands like that came out, those iconic sort of bands, I was like, this is for me. I was like, Run DMC. I was like, this is made for me. It just felt like my kind of music. And that's how I always felt about Nirvana. And obviously when Kurt Cobain died, it was extremely, heartbreaking and all that. And, I was never a giant Foo Fighters fan, but I always appreciated them, and I thought it was cool what Dave Grohl did with that band. And then one of my buddies kind of forced me to go see them at the Garden. And was like, dude, you have to come see these guys. And I was like, fine, I'll go. So I went to the show, several years ago, and it was one of the best shows I ever saw. And I remember distinctly from that show when Taylor Hawkins sang Tom Petty's Stop Dragging My Heart Around. And they also did a version of Pink Floyd's Time. And those two guys were just switching back and forth from vocals to drums. And I was like, these guys are incredible. Like, they're just such incredible performers and personalities and musicians. And I was really blown away. And I'll always be glad that I went to that show, and, hate seeing anyone, die young like that. 50 is young when you're my age.
Right.
Guy, he was about my age. I'm 51. And, just a terrible, terrible tragedy and a huge void. I think you've seen the outpouring from all communities, pop, rock, rap, metal, the hardcore dudes even coming out, showing him respect because he was a true artist and a true musician. It's a big loss.
I fear, and this is purely speculation on my part, it's not from anything I've heard, but I fear this is the end of that band because Taylor Hawkins and Dave Grohl were so tight and the chemistry was so great. And now, I don't think there's any way that they can continue on like they were anyway. So I fear it might be.
It would seem that way. I would agree. I mean, you look at what just happened with Rush, and now I see Alex Lifeson's got a new project. I'm happy to see that. I haven't heard it yet, but Dave Grohl's going to always do cool stuff. He did that Probot project several years ago with Lemmy and guys from Prong, and a real true like metal album, and that's the stuff that I've always respected and loved about Dave Grohl is he's not afraid to take chances, and a lot of the metal purists will kind of look down on him, but they're crazy because no one's done more for metal in the last 25 years than Dave Grohl. He's built that genre up every chance he's gotten, so I hope I know he's going to continue doing cool stuff. If the Foo Fighters are done, amazing career. It's sad, but it's probably for the best because I don't think he can do it without Taylor Hawkins.
I don't know if you've had a chance. He's got another metal project out called Dream Widow, which...
Yeah, I heard a couple of the songs. They're great. I haven't seen the movie. Have you seen the movie?
No, I haven't seen the Studio 666 movie yet, but I have spent time with Dream Widow, and it's... I love it. And, you're right. There's a lot. You know what, though? There's purists in every scene. There's hardos in every scene that are saying that you're not doing it the right way. And it's like, shut up, fascist. There's no right way to do it. I mean, if you do it well, and he doesn't do anything halfway, which is great. So, yeah, check that out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love the guy's spirit. And again, I'm not a drummer, so I'm not going to sit and say technically who's the best, but, I am a music connoisseur, and I've seen the guy live with Nirvana. I've seen him live with Foo Fighters, and the guy can play, and Taylor Hawkins could play, and they were fun to watch, and they were a cool band, and it's terrible, but these things happen. It's awful,
Yeah. Well, Dave Wedge, thank you so much. Best-selling author, journalist, podcaster, now stage performer. You can act that to well, you're performing the facts, I guess. So I don't know if it's performance, but Saints, Sinners, and Serial Killers live April 20th at the Wilbur. Also, check out the new album, Dave. Great new album.
I wish I had a new album.
I know, right? The new book, Ride with Evil, which looks really good. I can't wait to dig into that one. And thank you very much, Dave, for taking the time, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and congrats to you on the gig out there at the Pike. And keep it up. Love